I go by Amanda Parker. I'm lucky enough to be married to a wonderful guy named Mark, and we have a daughter, Lily, who means the world to us. However, if I go back to when I was 18, things looked quite a bit different. I had just finished up high school, which should have been one of the most joyous occasions in my life. Instead, the events of that day resulted in everything collapsing between my stepmother, Sandra, and my brother, Ian. It happened immediately following the graduation event. I still had my graduation garb on when Sandra took me to the side, wearing that insincere, strained grin she always put on before sharing terrible news. She almost purred when she told me, "Amanda, I need you to understand that the college money your father left for you will no longer be available to you." And that was it. She offered no reason, no compassion was shown. She simply stated it as if it were insignificant. I stood there paralyzed, trying to wrap my head around it. I asked, "What are you talking about?" My father had personally informed me about that money. He had made that account specifically for me when I was little. Sandra didn't even bat an eye, she just shrugged, as if commenting on the temperature. Well, after discussing it, Ian and I think the funds would be better utilized for something a bit more sensible. Ian's got an idea on how to use it, and to be honest, Amanda, you've always been a bit of a daydreamer. Perhaps college isn't the best path for you. I was absolutely floored by her words. Ian was always the favorite, and Sandra acted like he was perfect, but this was a whole new level of favoritism. That cash was supposed to be mine. Pop wanted me to attend university, I explained, my voice unsteady. Ian wandered over, clearly having listened in, and naturally he had to put his 2 cents in. "Relax, Amanda. I know I'll put it to good use. I'm thinking of putting it into investments, maybe launch my own company. That's what Pop would have wanted us to do, be responsible with it. You can always get student loans like everyone else if going to college is that important to you." He said it so flippantly, as if I should simply give in and accept it. My hands shook and my heart was racing like crazy. "You can't just grab what belongs to me. That's theft," I shouted. Sandra glanced around, clearly mortified that I was causing a commotion, and whispered sharply, "Keep your voice down, Amanda. This is a family matter and you're overreacting." I felt like screaming, but instead I just turned and left. After that, the entire graduation day was a complete haze. I recall sitting in my bedroom later that night, just staring at the roof, trying to figure out how things could have gone so off track. My father had died the prior year, and he had always been my support. Without him, I felt like Sandra and Ian had all the control, and I was completely isolated. The following day, I attempted to discuss it again, hoping Sandra would think about changing her mind. She just gave me an eye roll and told me, "Amanda, you're all grown up now." I guess it was time for me to take responsibility and sort things out on my own. Those funds were being used to support the family, and that included Ian. When I eventually shared the situation with Mark, who was my boyfriend back then, he was incredibly angry. That money was supposed to be used to help you in the future. However, from a legal standpoint, I didn't know what recourse I had. Since the account was under Sandra's name, and my father wasn't around anymore, I felt like I had no one to advocate for me. I told him to forget about it after Mark offered to assist me in understanding the situation. I didn't feel like fighting a battle I was destined to lose and potentially make everything even messier. So I dropped it, or at least that's what I acted like. But in my heart, I vowed something to myself. I'd prove they were wrong about me. I wanted to demonstrate that I could be successful on my own. Those following years were definitely not easy. I had to juggle several part-time jobs to barely get by as I attended courses at a local community college. I couldn't immediately afford a traditional university, but I was completely set on finishing my education, even if it required twice the time. During that time, Ian was really living the high life. He had started some so-called business, which was essentially just a nicer way of saying he was wasting all the money. It made me want to throw up. Throughout it all, Mark remained by my side and supportive. He motivated me to persevere even when I felt like just throwing in the towel. We had gotten engaged by the time I had transferred to a 4-year university. I still remember Sandra's response when she learned the news. "Amanda, are you really certain you're prepared for marriage?" she questioned. "I mean, it's a serious commitment, and it seems like you're still trying to sort out your direction in life." She delivered the line with that familiar patronizing way she always had, making me feel like some naive child. Naturally, Ian jumped in, echoing that maybe I should concentrate on my job, assuming you can even call it that. I was tempted to retort with a sharp reply, but instead, I just offered a smile and assured them that they shouldn't fret over my situation. I'm actually managing quite well, thank you very much. Those years at college were among the most challenging periods I have ever gone through. I was constantly trying to balance working, going to class, and somehow staying afloat. There were many days when I scarcely had the chance to sit down for a decent meal. I spent my evenings working at a coffee shop, while weekends were spent at a bookstore. I tried to squeeze in study time between shifts whenever possible. I felt like I was going through the motions, just pushing myself through each day. I remember nights spent crying from being overwhelmed, questioning whether it was all even worth the effort. But each time I considered giving up, I could almost hear my dad's words in my mind, reminding me of the original motivation I had. They may have robbed me of that financial support, but they couldn't steal my inner strength. It wasn't merely the money issues that made it so tough, it was the sadness and burden of feeling like my family didn't care. Not once did Sandra or Ian bother to reach out and see how I was doing. Truth be told, it felt like they didn't even see me. Sandra was still hosting those little get-togethers at her place, showing off Ian and his grand ambitions, while I was barely getting by on cheap ramen and struggling to pay my rent. I'll always remember the day I bumped into Ian at the supermarket. He was choosing some fancy cuts of meat, and my basket only had discount brand bread and some canned soup. He glanced my way, gave a little smile, and said, "Are you still stuck doing that whole broke college kid thing, eh? Life could be simpler if you just knew how to work the system." I kept quiet. I knew if I said anything, I'd probably lose it. By the time I was a sophomore, things began to change, bit by bit. I was fortunate enough to get a paid internship with a marketing company nearby, and that felt like it saved me. The money wasn't great, but it was enough that I could quit one of the jobs I was working on the side, and it also gave me some actual professional experience. And for the first time ever, I started to get the sense that I was actually creating something that would help me down the road. But even with that, things were still tough. My days just ran together with early morning classes, afternoons spent at the internship, and evenings spent either studying or pulling shifts at the coffee place. I had no social life whatsoever, and I was tired all the time. One of the absolute worst moments was when my laptop completely died the week before my final exams. I couldn't afford to buy a new one, so I had to borrow an old one from a friend. It felt like an eternity just to get a single document open because of how sluggish it was. I can recall being in the university library around midnight, desperately trying to get a paper finished that was due the following morning, and I completely lost it. I just felt like yelling at the injustice of the whole situation. Then, I started thinking about Sandra and Ian, and how they would likely find amusement in watching my difficulties, and that provided the encouragement I needed to persevere. I wasn't about to allow them to defeat me. It wasn't only the absence of encouragement from Sandra and Ian. It was the lengths they would go to in order to embarrass me, especially when other people were around. There's one Thanksgiving meal that's permanently etched in my memory. College had just begun for me. I wasn't intending on going, but Mark persuaded me to make an appearance. I should have listened to my instincts and remained at home. Sandra was the host, and the dinner table was crowded with her friends and a few of Ian's professional connections, if you catch my drift. Things were progressing without incident until Ian chose to speak. "So Amanda," he stated loudly, a smug look on his face as he reclined in his seat. "How's that exciting life as a student treating you? Still just making coffee and barely getting by?" Some of the people there gave a slight, awkward laugh, likely unsure of whether or not he was trying to be funny. My face started to feel hot, but Sandra cut in before I had a chance to say anything. "Oh, Ian, don't be so harsh," she said with that overly sweet voice she'd use whenever she wanted to seem generous. "Amanda is giving it her best shot." It's true that not everyone finds triumph easily right off the bat. The slight hesitation before doing the best she can, as she phrased it, really revealed her true feelings. Mark was really the one I depended on during all of that. He always helped me remember my reasons for persevering, regardless of how awful things became. I would arrive back from an evening shift or the library completely exhausted, and he would have food ready for me, maybe only a simple grilled cheese or some reheated food. There's a specific evening that's really unforgettable for me. I had just bombed a really important exam, and it felt like my whole world was collapsing. I arrived home, tossed my bag onto the floor, and just began to weep right there at the entrance. Instead of instantly asking me what was wrong, Mark embraced me and just allowed me to cry until I could talk. Once I finally managed to explain, he told me, "Amanda, you aren't defined by just one bad grade. You are attempting something that many others would have already abandoned. You are permitted to waver a bit, but you will not fail. This isn't something that can keep you down, you're tougher than this." Following that, he made me some hot chocolate, and he remained with me until I returned to my normal self. It wasn't only what he said, but also the confidence he had in me. Knowing that he was supporting me was crucial, even during times when I doubted my own abilities. By the time graduation came around, I felt as if I had conquered a huge obstacle. It wasn't only about the diploma itself, it was about everything the diploma signified. I'd actually succeeded, even though I faced some difficulties, and despite the fact that Sandra and Ian weren't supportive at all. The event happened without their presence because I chose not to invite them. I had Mark and a handful of my best friends present, enthusiastically supporting me as I accepted my diploma. I recall realizing that they weren't going to steal my happiness on that day. That day held a spot as one of my life's most treasured accomplishments. Shortly after graduation, I was hired at a marketing company that was average in size. Although it wasn't exciting, it did provide decent pay, and I could finally relax a bit. Mark and I got married the subsequent year, and soon after that, we were surprised by news that I was expecting Lily. I had a feeling that every part of my life was falling into place. As for Sandra and Ian, I didn't receive any news from them. They acted as though I had disappeared from their world. Advancing in my career presented its own challenges, but it felt like a logical progression of the tenacity I developed while studying. I began with an entry-level position, looking after small accounts that weren't appealing to others. I was dedicated to my work, often staying beyond regular hours and agreeing to tasks that weren't necessarily within my scope of duties. Eventually, others began taking note of my efforts. On one occasion, my boss called me aside after a major presentation and told me, "Amanda, the manner in which you interacted with that customer made you appear as though you had extensive experience in the field. Your skill for creating relationships with people is undeniable." It really mattered to me, but it also sparked a weird sense of discomfort. Hearing compliments from people at work, even from those I barely knew, just reminded me how little encouragement I ever received from my own family. In gatherings at work, my supervisor would constantly rave about how hard I worked, or I'd hear people I worked with saying things like, "Amanda's really talented, she's going to do great things," but I still felt a void inside. I constantly wondered, why couldn't my brother have expressed something similar? Why couldn't my mother have recognized my value? Rather, all I ever received from them were left-handed compliments or being completely ignored. It was a depressing feeling, understanding that the affirmation I desperately wanted during my adolescence would never come from them. My life continued to progress, and with each accomplishment, I felt like I was finally creating something lasting. After being at the firm for a few years, I obtained a promotion to account manager, where I would be in charge of my own team. It felt almost unbelievable. Only a short while ago, I was struggling to afford food, and now I was sitting in meetings with company leaders, presenting plans that I had come up with. Mark was my greatest supporter through it all. When I received the promotion, he threw a small, surprise dinner party at our place, inviting just a few of our good friends. He lifted his glass to make a toast, saying, "You deserve this. There isn't anyone more deserving." At nearly the same time, we had our daughter, Lily. From the moment I cradled her in my arms, everything else seemed insignificant. I remember gazing at her small features and thinking, "I'm going to make sure you always feel cared for and encouraged, no matter what." Becoming a mother brought an entirely new level of happiness and meaning into my existence. However, while my life was getting better, things were beginning to fall apart for Sandra and Ian. Ian's ambitious aspirations had vanished, his company had failed, and Sandra, who always cared so much about her place in society, appeared suddenly less sure of herself. People began to talk about them. They were having money problems, and apparently Ian had moved back into Sandra's house. I will always remember the day I unexpectedly saw Ian and Sandra at the supermarket. It had been quite some time since I had seen either of them, and truly, I wasn't ready for how changed they appeared. I was in the organic section, selecting some expensive cheese for a dinner party Mark and I were throwing. With Lily in the shopping cart, happily chatting away, I rounded the corner and almost ran into them. Ian was pushing a shopping cart containing just a few items, mostly processed food and a bag of rice, and Sandra was walking behind him, appearing tired and looking older than I remembered. "Amanda," Sandra spoke, her voice tinged with a mixture of surprise and embarrassment. When Ian looked up and saw me, his face tightened. Initially, I was at a loss for words. There I stood with my cart overflowing with premium food items, Lily laughing in her car seat while they appeared to be struggling to get by. Sandra attempted to put on her standard insincere smile. "You seem to be doing well, at least that's what she implied," glancing at my shopping cart. Ian just made a noise, too arrogant to actually verbalize anything. "Yeah, things have been going well," I responded without much thought, not trying to make them feel bad but unable to completely conceal the satisfaction bubbling inside. The difference was striking when I thought back to the last time our paths crossed at the market. Back then I was struggling and Ian was shoving his good fortune in my face. Following that awkward meeting, the situation shifted. All of a sudden, Sandra and Ian were trying to re-establish a connection with me. It began with little gestures, like Sandra ringing me up to say hello or leaving stilted comments on my social media posts. "Just checking in to see how you are, Amanda. It's been ages." She avoided directly referencing our conversation at the grocery store, but I couldn't help but notice the suspicious timing. Ian was nowhere near as discreet. Shortly after that, he sent a text. "Hey sis, maybe we could hang out sometime. There are some things I'd like to talk to you about." Initially, I paid them no mind. I didn't believe their motives, and to be honest, I was still far too resentful to even consider rebuilding our relationship. But they persisted. Sandra even started calling Mark, acting like a caring stepmother, asking about Lily and how we were all holding up. Mark, because he's such a good person, suggested to me that they might be trying to apologize. I wasn't convinced, though. To me, it didn't feel like sincere care, but more like they'd realized how well I was doing and wanted to glom onto my success. A part of me considered calling them out on it right away, but another part was interested to see just how committed they were to this act. I arrived at my place on a peaceful Saturday afternoon, only to notice Ian and Sandra hanging around in front of it. For a second, I actually wondered if my eyes were playing tricks on me. They seemed so out of place, like they had wandered into the wrong movie. Sandra was gripping her handbag tightly, her face drawn with worry, as Ian stood there with his hands tucked away in his pockets, focusing his gaze anywhere but on me. Since Mark and Lily were enjoying a trip to the zoo with his mom and dad, I was all alone. The reason I wasn't able to join them was that I needed to wrap up a few tasks at work in preparation for a crucial meeting I had scheduled for Monday. I let out a sigh, mentally preparing myself for whatever was about to unfold. As I got out of my vehicle, Sandra's face brightened up with that fake, practiced smile that I knew so well. "Amanda, how unexpected," she commented, as though they hadn't intentionally been waiting for me there. Ian offered me a curt nod, while still making sure to avoid making eye contact. "So, what brings you here?" I questioned directly, not in the mood to exchange pointless greetings. Sandra brushed off my question with a dismissive gesture. "Oh, we simply figured we'd stop by to see how you're doing. It's been a while, don't you agree?" I chose to remain silent. Sandra put on that practiced smile, the one she often used when delivering unpleasant news or attempting to sway people to do as she wished. "Amanda, honey, we were just talking about how proud your father would be of all you've accomplished. You've done such a remarkable job. Just look at this stunning house. You've really created something extraordinary." I remained quiet, folding my arms across my chest. I wasn't going to be swayed by her attempt at flattery. After a short, uncomfortable pause, Ian coughed and finally made eye contact with me. "So, what Sandra means to say is we're experiencing some difficulties. It hasn't been a walk in the park lately, you know." "Difficulties?" I questioned, squinting at him. I wanted a more precise explanation of that. Sandra glanced at Ian as if she thought he had jumped the gun. "It's really not a huge deal, just a few money-related issues." Ian's venture didn't pan out as successfully as we had envisioned, and to top it off, I've been dealing with some recent healthcare expenses. We're basically, how can I phrase this, a bit short on funds right now. And, I inquired, already anticipating where this was headed. Ian fidgeted in his seat, and we were hoping that perhaps you would be willing to lend a hand. You know, just a small amount to help us recover. Lend a hand, I said again, stunned. Are you actually asking me to give you money? Sandra sighed dramatically, her insincere smile disappearing. It sounds so severe when you put it like that, Amanda. It's not as though we're begging for a handout, it's just a temporary loan. You're so successful now, it's obvious you have the means. We wouldn't even be making this request if it weren't absolutely essential. Essential? I repeated, feeling my anger begin to rise. You mean like when it was essential to take my college savings? Or when you told me I would never be successful? Is this one of those so-called essentials? Ian's jaw clenched. That's not a fair accusation, Amanda. Back then, we believed we were acting in the best interest of everyone. I chuckled derisively. Who's it supposed to be good for, Ian? You maybe, Sandra? Definitely not me. Sandra clutched her chest like she'd been physically struck by my words. Oh, Amanda, that was ages ago, let's not rehash it. Is it too much to ask that we leave that in the past? Right now, we're here trying to fix what's broken. Does the concept of family hold no weight with you? Family, I retorted, my voice growing louder. Are you referring to the same family that abandoned me to take care of myself? The same ones who mocked my difficulties getting through school? The ones who never offered a single ounce of assistance? You've got some serious gall showing up here and carelessly throwing around the word family. Ian's face flushed and his composed act started to crumble. You're being completely unreasonable right now. You have everything you could ever want these days. A house, a husband, a fulfilling career. We're only asking for a small bit of help. You're obligated to do at least that much for us. I owe you, I retorted sharply. I don't owe you a thing. I earned every single thing I possess with absolutely no help from either of you. And now you actually think you can just stroll in here and manipulate me with guilt into handing over money? Absolutely not. Sandra's pretense of being nice finally disappeared. I cannot believe you're acting like this, she whispered angrily. After all the sacrifices we've made for you? Sacrifices for *me? I cut her off, a harsh laugh escaping my lips. What exactly have you done for me, other than actively making my life more difficult at every possible opportunity? Ian completely lost his cool. You are one selfish, thankless child. We provided you with a place to live, and this is how you treat us in return? I just looked at them, shocked by their boldness. Get off my land, I stated, my voice now devoid of warmth. I am completely finished with this discussion. Sandra squinted at me, her words laced with pure poison as she edged closer. You're going to live to rue the day, Amanda. There will come a time when you'll want our help, and we won't offer it. I retreated a step, pushing open the entrance to my home. Excellent, I haven't needed any of you to manage just fine. As I moved toward the doorway, a harsh, mocking laugh erupted from Sandra. Suit yourself, Amanda. Continue acting like you're superior to everyone. You should be grateful to us. Ian added, his tone full of resentment. Do you think you're superior now, with your flawless little family and pretty home? I paused, spinning around for one last look at them. It's the perfect example. I then went inside, slamming the door shut behind me with force. Even while inside, I could hear Sandra grumbling furiously as they left. But as their voices grew more distant, all I experienced was a sense of release. Finally, after years of enduring, I really got the significance of cutting ties, both literally and metaphorically. And I knew this door would remain shut permanently. The weather was perfect. The sky was blue, sounds of fun were all around, and the aroma of popcorn filled the air. Lily was incredibly happy, gesturing towards each attraction and pleading to ride the roller coasters. We were headed in the direction of the food vendors when I spotted him. It was Ian, emerging from a park bathroom, dressed in a worn park uniform and carrying a mop and bucket. For a split second, he hadn't noticed our presence. His head was lowered and he appeared completely drained, his shoulders drooped. Yet then, as we approached, he looked up suddenly and stopped dead in his tracks. Our gazes locked, and right then and there, I could see both the realization and the embarrassment reflected in his eyes. Before any words could escape my lips, he spun around and hurried off, pushing the mop bucket ahead of him as rapidly as possible. His body was rigid, almost as if he was clinging to some last bit of dignity. I simply stood there, observing as he vanished into the mass of people. Mark noticed me stop walking and gave me a questioning look. Is everything all right? He inquired. I nodded my head slowly, putting on a fake smile for Lily's benefit. Sure, let's go hunt down that cotton candy. As we were leaving the park later that day, I couldn't shake the thoughts of Ian out of my head. Seeing him in that state, steering clear of me, feeling ashamed, resurrected a wave of past experiences. The cruel taunts, the belittling remarks, all those years of being made to feel worthless, and Sandra, who was always there to support him, to make the situation even more painful. For what seemed like forever, I had carried the burden of their hurtful words, allowing them to diminish my sense of self-worth. But things are different now. Looking at Mark as he held Lily's hand while she excitedly talked about her favorite attractions, a smile crept across my face. This is the life I have now. A devoted husband, a smart and pretty daughter, and a profession that I put a lot of effort into establishing. I had accomplished all of it on my own without their support. The greatest thing is, I no longer cared about receiving their approval. They had spent so many years trying to bring me down, yet here I stood, content, thriving, and among people who genuinely cared for me. I reflected on how the lives of Sandra and Ian had fallen apart, and for a fleeting moment I felt a twinge of sympathy. But it quickly faded away. They had made their own decisions, and they were dealing with the repercussions. I had wasted sufficient time feeling sad about the family I had always desired. Instead, I was concentrating on the family I had created, the one that truly counted. As we headed toward the vehicle, Lily pulled on my arm, drawing me into her enthusiasm for the day ahead. I grinned as I looked down at her, experiencing only thankfulness for the existence that I was currently living.